Officer, I am Celeste Madler. I'm the new district attorney of Hargrove County. My credentials are in this envelope. Officer Freddie Perman didn't respond. He snatched the brown envelope from Celeste's hands, pulled out her documents, and dropped them like garbage without even looking at them. Celeste stood on the gravel shoulder of Route 9 in her suit. She said nothing. Her face gave him nothing. In her hand, her phone kept recording. A few feet away, her husband stood in his good clothes, wrists in cuffs, while passing cars slowed to stare. What Freddie Perman didn't know, the woman who's standing calmly in front of him was the one person in Hargrove County who now had the legal authority to end his entire career. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you can't miss. The morning felt like a promise. Celeste Madler had been awake since 5. Not because she was nervous, she wasn't, not exactly, but because some mornings are too important to sleep through. She had lain in the dark beside her husband and listened to the house breathe and thought about everything that had led to this day. Several years of it, law school on a shoestring, 70-hour weeks, cases nobody else wanted, courtrooms where the odds were stacked before she even opened her mouth. All of it had been pointing here. She stood at the bathroom mirror at 5:47 a.m. and pinned a small American flag to the lapel of her charcoal blazer. Her fingers were steady. Her eyes were clear. At 42, Celeste Madler looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had decided a long time ago that she was not going to lose. Marlon was already in the kitchen making coffee when she came downstairs. He was 44, broad-shouldered, with a warm face and the kind of calm that had always anchored her when the world got loud. He looked up when she walked in and gave her the smile she had married him for. "You look like a district attorney," he said. "That's because I am one." He laughed. She took the coffee he handed her and felt, for one long, quiet moment, like everything was exactly right. By 8 o'clock, they were heading to the car. Marlon held out his hand for the keys at the front door. "Let me drive," he said. "It's your big day. Sit back and enjoy it." Celeste looked at his hand, then looked at him. "The last time you drove my car, you spent 20 minutes finding a parking spot, and then parked crooked anyway. That lot had terrible markings. Marlon." The lines were bright yellow. He opened his mouth, closed it. She walked past him and got in the driver's seat. The new Cadillac Escalade, silver, clean, still smelling faintly of the dealership, moved smoothly under her hands as she pulled onto the 2-lane stretch of Route 9. The Georgia morning was cool and sharp. October light cut gold through the tree line on either side of the road. The courthouse was 5 miles ahead. The swearing-in ceremony started at 9. On the back seat sat a brown envelope, thick and slightly overstuffed. Inside it was her official letter of appointment, her bar credentials, and her state-issued ID, everything she needed for the ceremony, all in one place. She had checked inside it 3 times before leaving the house. Marlon had caught her doing it and teased her without mercy. "You checked that envelope again," he said now, from the passenger seat. "I did not." "You did. That's 4 times since breakfast." "It's an important envelope, Marlon." "It's sitting right there on the back seat, Celeste. Same place it was 2 minutes ago." She looked straight ahead, so he wouldn't see her smile. This was them. This had always been them. His steadiness meeting her intensity. His ease cutting through her focus. 18 years of it. She reached over and rested her hand briefly on his arm at a red light, and he covered it with his without a word. "You ready?" he asked. "I've been ready," she said. "For a long time." He nodded. He knew. He had been there for all of it. They rode in comfortable silence for a minute. The road was quiet this early on a Tuesday. A few trucks, a school bus in the oncoming lane. The kind of ordinary morning that doesn't announce itself. That was when the lights appeared. Blue. Flashing. Right behind her. Celeste saw them in the rearview mirror first. She checked the speedometer automatically. She was doing 52 in a 55. She had not run a red light. She had not changed lanes without signaling. She had done nothing wrong. But that didn't stop the cold that moved through the car anyway. That particular cold, the one black people in America know in their bones, settled over both of them in an instant. 18 years of marriage, and they had never needed to explain it to each other. They just felt it at the same time, in the same way, and understood. Beside her, Marlon straightened slowly in his seat. His jaw tightened. Celeste's hands stayed firm on the wheel. She guided the Escalade onto the gravel shoulder slowly and carefully, the way you do when someone is watching, and you want there to be absolutely no question about your intentions. Gravel crunched under the tires. The blue lights kept spinning. Neither of them spoke. In the rear-view mirror, the cruiser door swung open. The officer who stepped out was broad, unhurried, and white. He adjusted his belt before he started walking. He moved the way a certain kind of man moves when he has decided, before he even gets to the window, how this is going to go. Badge number 1147 caught the morning sun as he approached. Celeste watched him come. Her hand moved, slowly, to her phone. The officer didn't say good morning. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood at the driver's window with his thumbs hooked in his belt and looked at the car the way a man looks at something he's already decided belongs to him. His eyes moved slow, across the dashboard, across the back seat, across Marlon, before they finally settled on Celeste. "This vehicle was reported stolen last night," he said. "Step out of the car." No introduction, no ma'am. No license and registration, please. Just a statement delivered like a verdict. Celeste kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. Her voice came out smooth and level. "I'm sorry, officer, but that's not possible. This car belongs to me. I purchased it 11 days ago." She tilted her head slightly toward the back seat without breaking eye contact. "My documentation is in that envelope on the back seat." Perman didn't look at the envelope. He looked at her. "I said step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Marlon shifted in the passenger seat. "Officer, there has to be a mistake. This is our car." "Sir." Perman's eyes cut to Marlon like a blade. "I am not talking to you. Keep your hands where I can see them and do not reach for anything." The word anything landed hard. Deliberate. Like he was already writing a different story in his head. One where Marlon was dangerous, where the car was stolen, where everything about this moment justified whatever came next. Celeste felt the cold move through her again. Deeper this time. She reached slowly, every movement measured and visible, toward the door handle. She opened it and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder, standing straight in her charcoal blazer, the American flag pin catching the morning light. She faced Perman and kept her chin level. "Officer, my name is Celeste Madler. I am the newly elected district attorney of Hargrove County. My swearing-in ceremony is this morning, in less than an hour." She kept her tone professional, firm. "I have my official letter of appointment, my bar credentials, and my state-issued ID in that brown envelope on the back seat. I'd like to retrieve them so I can clear this up." Something moved across Perman's face. Not recognition, not even doubt. More like mild irritation, the kind a man feels when someone is taking longer than expected to comply. "I don't care what you say you are," he said. "The plate on this vehicle came back flagged as stolen. That's all I need." He pulled his radio from his belt. "I'm calling for backup." "You're calling for backup," Celeste repeated, quietly, almost to herself. "Step to the rear of the vehicle." She didn't move immediately. She looked at him the way you look at something you want to remember clearly later. Every detail, the set of his jaw, the flatness in his eyes, the complete and total absence of any doubt in his posture, as if the possibility that he could be wrong had never once crossed his mind. Then she stepped to the rear of the Escalade. Through the back window, she could see Marlon sitting perfectly still in the passenger seat, both hands resting open on his knees, visible, unthreatening. The careful, practiced stillness of a black man who understood exactly what kind of moment this was and exactly how quickly it could become something worse. 18 years of marriage, and it still made her stomach turn. She reached into her jacket, not her breast pocket, just her side pocket, and wrapped her fingers around her phone. She pulled it out slowly, held it where Perman could see it, and opened the camera without a word. She pressed record. The little red dot blinked. Perman noticed. His eyes dropped to the phone and came back up. "You recording me?" "Yes, sir." "I am." His jaw shifted. "Put that away." "I'm standing on a public road," Celeste said. "I have the right to record this interaction." For just a moment, one single moment, something flickered behind Perman's eyes. Not guilt, not shame. Something more like recalculation. He was deciding something. Then he turned away from her and got back on his radio. Celeste kept the camera steady. Her hand did not shake. Her face did not crack. But her eyes stayed on badge number 1147, burning it into her memory like a brand. Because she already knew. Standing there on the gravel shoulder of Route 9 in her swearing-in blazer, while her husband sat frozen in the passenger seat and the blue lights kept spinning, that this moment was not going to end here. Not even close. The radio crackled. Perman had his back half turned to Celeste, speaking low into the receiver clipped to his shoulder. She couldn't hear everything. Just fragments. Possible stolen vehicle. Route 9. Requesting backup. Backup. For a plate check. Celeste kept the phone steady and kept recording. She noted the time out loud, quietly but clearly. 8:21 a.m. She stated the location. She read badge number 1147 into the camera the same way she had read evidence into court records for years. Carefully. Precisely. Making sure every word was captured. Through the rear window she could see Marlon still sitting in the passenger seat, both hands flat on his knees. He hadn't moved, hadn't reached for anything, hadn't said a word since Perman shut him down. He was doing everything right. Everything a black man in America learns to do when a badge and a bad attitude show up at the window. And it didn't matter one bit, because Perman had already decided what this was going to be. That was the part that burned. Perman finished on the radio and turned back toward the car. He pulled open the passenger door without warning. "Sir, out of the vehicle. Now." Marlon turned his head slowly. "Is there a reason?" "I won't ask again." The words hit the air like a door slamming. Marlon held Perman's gaze for exactly one breath. Then he nodded once, small, controlled, and stepped out. He was careful about it. Textbook careful. Door opened wide, both hands raised slightly, movements slow and deliberate, and visible from every angle. He stepped onto the gravel and stood straight. He was wearing a navy pullover and slacks. He looked like exactly what he was, a decent man on his way to watch his wife be sworn in, and none of it mattered. Perman moved fast. He grabbed Marlon by the arm, spun him toward the side of the Escalade, and had the cuffs out before Marlon could draw a full breath. "What are you—" Marlon started. "Hands behind your back." "I haven't done anything." "Hands." The cuffs clicked shut. Celeste's jaw locked so tight it ached. She kept the camera up. She kept her voice steady as she continued narrating. Officer has placed passenger in handcuffs, no resistance offered, no cause given. But inside, something was pulling tight, like a wire stretched past its limit. That was her husband, standing handcuffed on the side of a public road in his good clothes on the most important morning of their lives. Two cars slowed as they passed. A white pickup, a minivan. The minivan slowed almost to a stop. Celeste could see a woman in the driver's seat, phone already out. Good, she thought. Get all of it. Marlon stood with his back straight and his chin up and his hands locked behind him, and he didn't say another word. That was the thing about Marlon Madler. He knew how to carry himself in the middle of humiliation. He had learned it the hard way, the same as she had. You didn't give them the reaction they were looking for. You didn't fall apart. You stood up straight and you remembered who you were, even when they were doing everything they could to make you forget. But she could see his jaw. She knew that jaw. He was holding himself together with everything he had. The second cruiser arrived 7 minutes later, tires crunching on gravel, lights spinning. It pulled in tight behind Perman's car. The door opened and Deputy Addison Reynolds stepped out, 34 years old. Dark uniform, natural hair pulled back clean. She came around the front of her cruiser with the practiced efficiency of someone who had responded to backup calls 100 times and knew exactly what to expect. Then she saw the passenger standing handcuffed against the silver Escalade. Then she saw the woman behind the car holding the phone. Reynolds stopped walking. It wasn't a dramatic stop. It was the kind that happens when your brain needs a half-second to catch up with your eyes. She knew that face. She had seen it on the news 3 weeks ago. Election night coverage on the local station. The woman standing at a podium in front of a crowd. The headline crawling across the bottom of the screen. First black woman elected district attorney of Hargrove County. The color drained from Reynolds's face so fast it was visible from 10 feet away. She took one step toward Perman. Her mouth opened. Perman turned and looked at her. Just looked. One sharp, flat look that said everything without saying a single word. Stay out of it. Reynolds closed her mouth. Cover the other side, Perman said. She hesitated for just a moment. A moment Celeste filed away carefully, right alongside badge number 1147. Then Reynolds walked to the other side of the vehicle. Celeste lowered her phone, not because Perman told her to, because she had made a decision. She walked around to the side of the Escalade, reached through the open back door, and picked up the brown envelope from the seat. She turned and held it out to Perman with one hand, her phone still recording in the other. Everything you need is in here, she said. My appointment letter. My bar credentials, my state ID. I am the new district attorney of Hargrove County. My swearing-in ceremony is in 38 minutes, and my husband is standing handcuffed on the side of this road for absolutely no reason. Perman looked at the envelope like it had been placed there to inconvenience him personally. He took it, slowly, pulled out the contents and looked them over with the unhurried attention of a man who had already made up his mind, and was only bothering with this part because he had to. Celeste watched his face. She saw it. The exact moment it landed. The official county seal on the appointment letter. Her name printed beneath the title. District Attorney, Hargrove County, State of Georgia. The bar credentials with the state seal. The ID with her photograph looking back at him from his own hand. The shift in his expression was small. Almost nothing. A slight tightening around the eyes. A jaw muscle that moved once and went still. That was all he gave her. The tiniest crack in the wall before he plastered it back over with stubbornness. Vehicles still flagged, he said. He handed the documents back without looking at her. I'm doing my job. You're doing your job, Celeste repeated. That's what I said. Then do it completely. Call dispatch and verify the VIN. Herman's eyes came up sharp, like he wasn't used to being told what to do on a traffic stop, like the instruction itself was an offense. Celeste held his gaze and did not blink. He got on the radio. The wait was 4 minutes and 19 seconds. Celeste knew because she watched the timer running on her phone camera the entire time. 4 minutes and 19 seconds of Marlon standing in handcuffs on the shoulder of Route 9. The October sun climbing higher. Another 3 cars slowing as they passed. 4 minutes and 19 seconds of Perman leaning against the hood of his cruiser with his arms crossed, looking at nothing in particular, performing patience. Addison Reynolds stood on the far side of the Escalade. She didn't look at Celeste. But Celeste noticed that she hadn't moved far, and she noticed that Reynolds's body camera was pointed in exactly the right direction. The radio crackled. Dispatch came back flat and clear through the static. The VIN on the vehicle did not match any stolen vehicle in the system. The flag had been generated by a clerical input error at the sheriff's department. The vehicle was registered to a Celeste A. Madler of Hargrove County. The report was invalid. Perman stood up straight. He stood there for a moment with the radio in his hand and said nothing. Then he walked to Marlon, pulled out his key, and uncuffed him. No explanation. No, I apologize for the inconvenience. No acknowledgement that Marlon Madler had been standing handcuffed on a public road for the better part of 20 minutes for absolutely nothing. Just the mechanical click of the cuffs coming off, and Perman stepping back. Marlon rolled his wrists slowly. His face was still composed, still controlled, but Celeste could see the marks where the cuffs had pressed into his skin, and something deep in her chest pulled so hard it nearly took her breath. Perman walked back to her and held out the brown envelope. "You're free to go," he said. That was it. 4 words. No title, no apology, no recognition of a single thing that had just happened. He was already turning away before she had even taken the envelope from his hand. Celeste let him take 3 steps. "Badge number 1147, she said. Her voice was even, quiet, precise as a scalpel. "I have all of this on video." Perman kept walking. He did not turn around, did not break stride, got to his cruiser, opened the door, and got in like it was any other Tuesday. Celeste stood there and watched until the door closed behind him. Then she felt it, a hand, light and brief, on her arm. She turned. Addison Reynolds was standing beside her. The deputy's eyes were wide and glassy and full of something that looked a lot like shame. She glanced once at Perman's cruiser. Then she looked at Celeste directly and mouthed 2 words so quietly they made no sound at all. "I'm sorry." Celeste looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once, just once, and turned back to Marlon. He was already holding the car door open for her. They were 23 minutes late. Celeste pulled into the courthouse parking lot at 8:57 a.m., found a spot on the 2nd level, and cut the engine. For a moment, neither she nor Marlon moved. They just sat there in the quiet of the car, the blue lights long gone, the gravel of Route 9 behind them like a bad dream you're still shaking off. Then Marlon reached over and straightened the American flag pin on her lapel. His fingers were gentle, careful, the same way he had always touched things that mattered. "You ready?" he said. It was the same question he had asked 40 minutes ago on a peaceful stretch of road before the world interrupted. But it meant something different now, and they both knew it. Celeste looked at him, at the marks still faintly visible on his wrists. "Yes," she said, and she meant it more now than she had then. The room was full. Judges, attorneys, county officials, community members who had driven in from every corner of Hargrove County to be here for this. People who had knocked on doors and made phone calls and believed, long before anyone else did, that this day was coming. They filled every chair and lined the back wall 3 deep. And when Celeste walked in, 23 minutes late, chin up, flag pin on her lapel, the room responded the way rooms do when something important finally arrives. The ceremony was brief and exact. Someone made a quiet joke about the delay. Nobody asked why. Celeste placed her left hand on the Bible and raised her right hand, and spoke the words of the oath in a clear, steady voice that carried to every corner of the room. She meant every single word. When it was done, the room erupted, and Marlon was the first person to reach her, and he held her the way he had held her through every hard thing for 18 years. And she let herself have exactly 15 seconds of it before she pulled back and smiled at the room and got to work. By 2 o'clock, the ceremony crowd had cleared, and the courthouse had settled into its ordinary Tuesday rhythm. Celeste sat at her new desk in her new office for the first time. Boxes still stacked against one wall, her degrees not yet hung, the leather chair still foreign beneath her, and stared out the window at the city below. Rocco Olbert knocked twice and came in carrying 2 coffees. He was 48, medium height, with close-cropped gray at his temples, and the kind of steady, unhurried presence that made people trust him immediately. He had been her chief investigator for 6 years in Atlanta. When she came back to Hargrove County, he came with her. She had not asked him to. He had simply shown up. He set a cup on her desk and settled into the chair across from her. "How was the morning?" he said. She looked at him. Then she told him everything. She told it the way she told things, plainly, in order, without drama. The blue lights on Route 9. Perman at the window. The 4 minutes standing outside her own car while Marlon sat frozen in the passenger seat. The backup call for a routine plate check. The handcuffs clicking shut on her husband's wrists. The 4 minutes and 19 seconds of nothing while dispatch confirmed what she had already told him. The 2 words, "free to go," delivered like she was an inconvenience he was finished with. Rocco's face hardened as she talked. Not dramatically. Just the slow, quiet way a man's face hardens when he is listening carefully and doesn't like what he's hearing. When she finished, the office was silent for a moment. "You have the footage?" he said. "Every second of it." He nodded. Started to say something. She held up one hand. "There's more," she said. She opened the top drawer of her desk and pulled out a folder, worn at the edges, thick with printed pages. She had been carrying it since before the election, since the transition briefings, when she had quietly requested access to departmental complaint records and spent 3 nights reading through them at the kitchen table while Marlon slept. She slid it across the desk to Rocco. "Freddie Perman," she said. 11 misconduct complaints in the last 10 years. Racially charged stops, excessive force, intimidation. Not one of them went anywhere. Not one was properly investigated." She paused. "Every single one was buried by Sheriff Ricky Tomlinson." Rocco opened the folder. His eyes moved down the first page. "There's a man named Andy Gilden," Celeste continued. 67 years old. He filed a complaint against Perman in 2019. 2 weeks later, he was arrested on charges that were never proven and never explained. He sat in county jail for 4 months. Then the charges disappeared. He was released quietly. She stopped. He died 8 months later. Rocco looked up from the folder. Celeste looked back at him. "I'm not filing a personal complaint," she said. "I'm building a case, a real one, with subpoena power and the full weight of this office behind it. I want Perman, and I want the man who has been protecting him." Rocco was quiet for a long moment. He looked back down at the folder, turned another page. Then he set down his coffee cup with a quiet, deliberate click. "Tell me where to start," he said. 9 days into the job, Celeste's assistant knocked and told her Sheriff Tomlinson was here. She already knew he was coming. Not because she had been told, she hadn't, but because men like Ricky Tomlinson operated on a predictable schedule. They watched. They waited just long enough to seem unhurried. Then they showed up with coffee and a smile and called it a courtesy. "Send him in," she said. She did not stand up. Ricky Tomlinson, 61, filled the doorway the way a man fills a doorway when he spent 16 years being the most powerful person in every room he enters. He was tall, thick through the shoulders, with silver hair combed back neat, and a smile that had probably charmed half the county commission more times than she could count. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee from the courthouse cafe downstairs, one in each hand, offered forward like a peace gesture. "District Attorney Madler," he said, warm as a Sunday morning. "Thought I'd come introduce myself properly. I know things got off to a rocky start. Sheriff Tomlinson." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down." He sat. He set one coffee in front of her and kept the other for himself. He looked around the office. The stacked boxes, the bare walls, the degrees still leaning unhung against the baseboard, and nodded approvingly, like a man surveying real estate he already owned. "Still getting settled in," he said. "That's understandable. Big transition." "I'm getting there," Celeste said. "Good, good." He crossed one leg over the other and wrapped both hands around his cup. "I want to start by saying, what happened with Officer Perman was unfortunate. A clerical error in our dispatch system that should never have made it to the field. I've already had words with the people responsible." He shook his head slowly, performing regret. "You and your husband should never have been put through that. I mean that sincerely." Celeste looked at him. "I appreciate you saying so." "Of course." He smiled. "Now, I know you're new to this office, and I know you came up from Atlanta, so maybe some of the, let's call it the texture, of how things work here in Hargrove County is still a little unfamiliar." He paused, took a sip of coffee. "Our department and the DA's office have always had a strong working relationship, real cooperative. That relationship is what keeps this county running smoothly, safe. I'd hate to see anything disrupt that, especially right at the start of a new administration." There it was. Not a threat. Never a threat. Men like Tomlinson were too careful for that. Just a description of how things were. Just a quiet reminder that the machinery of this county had been running long before she arrived, and would keep running however she chose to engage with it. Celeste picked up the coffee cup, took one measured sip, set it back down. "I completely agree," she said. "A strong working relationship between our offices is essential. The people of this county deserve nothing less." Tomlinson's smile broadened. He liked that answer. It was the answer he had come here expecting to receive. "I think we're going to get along just fine," he said. He stayed 18 minutes, left with his easy smile intact. The door had barely clicked shut behind him before Rocco appeared from the adjoining office doorway, where he had been working quietly the entire time. He looked at Celeste. "He came here to size me up," she said. "I know." Rocco walked to the desk and opened the folder he was carrying, thicker now than it had been 9 days ago. "While you were getting sized up, I was pulling records." He set the folder down and turned it toward her. 4 of Perman's 11 buried complaints. The complainants all had run-ins with the sheriff's department within 90 days of filing. Stops, arrests, citations that went nowhere but stayed on record long enough to cause damage. He tapped the top page. It's not coincidence. It's a pattern. Tomlinson wasn't just protecting Perman. He was sending messages to anyone who tried to speak up. Celeste looked down at the page, at the names, at the dates, at the neat, quiet, documented evidence of 16 years of a man using a badge as a weapon against ordinary people who had done nothing except refuse to stay silent. She thought about Tomlinson's smile, his coffee, his careful, practiced warmth. I'd hate to see anything disrupt that. She closed the folder. Good, she said. Rocco responded without looking up from his files. Let him underestimate you. 3 days after Tomlinson's visit, Celeste found it on the front page. She was at the kitchen table before 6, still in her robe, coffee going cold beside her. Marlon was upstairs. The house was quiet. She unfolded the Hargrove County Courier the way she did every morning, methodically, starting with the front page. And there it was, below the fold, with a headline that made her set down her cup. New DA's traffic stop. Misunderstanding or political move. She read it once straight through without stopping. Then she read it again, slower, the way she read evidence. The piece was 400 words, credited to a staff reporter, but sourced heavily to someone described only as a senior law enforcement official with direct knowledge of the incident. The writing was careful, no outright lies, no accusations she could point to directly. Just framing, just the slow, practiced art of telling a story sideways. The stop was described as a routine response to an erroneous system flag that was identified and resolved at the scene. Perman was not named. The clerical error was mentioned in passing, as if it were a minor footnote rather than the entire explanation. Marlon being handcuffed on the side of Route 9 for 20 minutes was not mentioned at all. What was mentioned, twice, was the question of whether the new district attorney, who was personally involved in the incident, might be considering using the resources of her office to pursue what some officials were already privately calling a personal grievance against the sheriff's department. The article quoted no one by name on that point. It didn't need to. The suggestion was already planted, clean and deep, like a splinter under skin. Sources close to the department expressed hope that the new administration would prioritize building cooperative relationships with local law enforcement, rather than allowing a resolved misunderstanding to become a distraction from the serious work ahead. Celeste folded the paper in half, then in half again. She set it on the table and looked at it for a moment. Then she got dressed and went to work. By 11 o'clock, her phone had rung 4 times from numbers she recognized as county commission offices. She let Rocco handle the first 3. The 4th she took herself, because Rocco appeared in her doorway and said 2 words: Hector Beckford. Commissioner Hector Beckford was 63 years old and had held his seat on the Hargrove County Commission for 14 years. He had the particular confidence of a man who had never faced a serious challenge for anything he wanted. He also had a long and well-documented friendship with Ricky Tomlinson that went back to a fishing trip in 2008 and had been producing favorable budget decisions for the sheriff's department ever since. He didn't waste time. Celeste, can I call you Celeste? I'm going to be straight with you because I think you're a smart woman, and smart people appreciate straight talk. His voice was smooth, almost friendly. The people of this county voted for you because they wanted a strong DA, somebody competent, somebody focused. What they did not vote for is drama. They did not vote for a war between your office and the sheriff's department. Commissioner Beckford, Celeste said, I appreciate the call. What I'm saying is, there are ways to handle things quietly that serve everybody better than making a public spectacle. Whatever happened on that road, it's over. It was a mistake. It got fixed. Sometimes the smartest move a new office holder can make is knowing when to let something go. The word spectacle sat in the air between them like something he had dropped on purpose. I'll keep that in mind, Celeste said. Thank you for calling. She hung up. Rocco was still in the doorway. He had heard enough. The story came from inside the department, he said. I confirmed it this morning. The language in that article matches internal talking points that were circulated by email yesterday afternoon. He paused. Tomlinson was in her office 3 days ago drinking coffee. and talking about cooperation. By yesterday afternoon, his department was feeding a narrative to the press. Celeste looked at the folded newspaper on the corner of her desk. At the headline she could no longer read, but could still see clearly in her head. Misunderstanding or political move. She opened the desk drawer and placed the paper inside. Closed it. They wanted her rattled. They wanted her calculating the cost of continuing. They wanted her to see the machine they were willing to run against her and decide quietly that it wasn't worth it. She looked at Rocco. "Keep pulling," she said. 2 days after the Courier's story, Rocco drove east. The neighborhood sat on the far side of town. Modest houses on quiet streets, small yards kept neat, the kind of block where people knew their neighbors and looked out for each other. He found the address just after 6 in the evening, parked at the curb, and walked up the front path. A child's bicycle leaned against the porch railing. The lights inside were on. He knocked twice. Addison Reynolds answered the door, still in part of her uniform. Pants, undershirt, badge clipped to her hip, but the outer shirt gone. She was 34, with sharp, tired eyes, and the guarded posture of someone who had been waiting for this knock, and had spent the last 2 days deciding what to do when it came. She looked at Rocco. He looked at her. "Mr. Olbert," she said. "Deputy Reynolds. I appreciate you opening the door." She studied him for a moment. Then she stepped back and let him in. They sat at her kitchen table. She didn't offer coffee. She folded her hands in front of her and got straight to it in the way people do when they've already rehearsed the conversation in their head a dozen times. "I know why you're here," she said. "And I need you to understand something before you say a single word. I have a daughter. She's 7. I have a mortgage on this house that I pay by myself every month. And I have 11 years in that department. 11 years I've worked for and fought for and held on to through things you don't even know about." She held his gaze. "So whatever you're about to ask me, I need you to understand what it costs." Rocco nodded slowly. "I understand. I don't think you do. Maybe not completely," he said. "But I've watched enough people in your position to know that what you're describing is real. The fear is real. What it costs to speak up, that's real. I'm not going to sit here and pretend otherwise." Reynolds looked at the table. "I shouldn't have been there that morning. It was Perman's call, his stop. Backup wasn't necessary. We both know that." She paused. "When I pulled up and saw her standing there, Ms. Madler, I knew immediately. Everybody in the department knew who she was the second those election results came in." She exhaled slowly. "I tried to say something to Perman. You saw what happened." "I saw," Rocco said. "He's been doing this for as long as I've been on the force. Longer." Her jaw tightened. "Stops that don't make sense. People treated like criminals for driving, while black on the wrong road at the wrong time. I've watched it. I've been the backup on stops I had no business being backup on." She looked up. "And every single time somebody tried to do something about it, it went nowhere. You know why? Because Tomlinson made it go nowhere. Every time." Rocco let her sit with that for a moment. Then he spoke. "There was a man named Andy Gilden," he said. 67 years old. Retired postal worker. Lived over on Clement Street his whole life. In the spring of 2019, Officer Perman pulled him over 3 blocks from his own house. No valid reason. Detained him for 40 minutes. Rocco kept his voice even. Mr. Gilden filed a complaint. Did everything right. Filed it in writing. Followed up twice. 2 weeks later, he was arrested. Possession charges. Never proven. Never explained. He sat in county jail for 4 months. Then the charges disappeared. Quietly. Like they were never real to begin with. Rocco paused. He was released in October of that year. He died the following June. Heart failure, but his daughter will tell you, he wasn't the same man after those 4 months. Something broke in him that didn't heal. The kitchen was very quiet. Reynolds was looking at the table again. Her hands had unfolded, and her fingers were pressed flat against the wood, like she needed something solid. "I didn't know all of that," she said. Her voice was lower now. "I knew about the complaint. I didn't know what happened after." "Most people didn't," Rocco said. "That was the point." He didn't push further. He didn't lay out what he needed from her, didn't describe the case they were building, didn't make a single ask. He just let Andy Gilden sit in the room between them and do what the truth does when it's finally spoken out loud. He stood up after a moment, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. "I appreciate your time, Deputy Reynolds." She didn't get up. She was still looking at the table. "Mr. Olbert," she said, as he reached the hallway. He stopped. She looked up at him. Her eyes were steady, but something behind them had shifted. Some internal door that had been locked tight was standing just slightly open. "Give me some time," she said. Rocco nodded once. Then he let himself out. Celeste saw the video on a Thursday morning. She was at her desk going through case files when Rocco walked in without knocking, which meant it was important, and turned his laptop screen toward her without saying a word. She watched it twice. It was shaky footage, shot through a passenger window at an angle, but clear enough. A black man in a minister's collar standing on the shoulder of a 2-lane road. Both hands visible. Voice steady. A Hargrove County Sheriff's cruiser behind him, lights going, and Freddie Perman, badge 1147, unmistakable, pacing the scene like he owned it. The stop lasted 31 minutes. 31 minutes for a license plate that Perman claimed he couldn't read clearly. 31 minutes of a 58-year-old pastor standing on the side of the road while Perman ran checks that came back clean every single time. The video had been posted by a church deacon who had been sitting in the passenger seat and had the presence of mind to start recording 4 minutes in. By the time Celeste watched it, the clip had been shared over 2,000 times on local social media pages and was climbing. "That's Reverend Enrique Wenrick," Rocco said, "pastor of Grace Tabernacle Baptist. Been in this county for 30 years. Celeste watched it a third time. She watched the way Perman moved around Reverend Wenrick, unhurried, dismissive, deliberately slow in running each check. She watched the way Wenrick stood, composed, patient, burning. She had stood in exactly that same place 3 weeks ago. "Has he filed anything?" she asked. "Not yet. From what I can tell, he went straight home after the stop. His congregation is furious. The video has been picked up by 2 Atlanta news stations as of this morning." Celeste closed the laptop. She stood up, smoothed her jacket, and looked at Rocco. "Get me his number," she said. Reverend Enrique Wenrick answered on the second ring. His voice was deep and measured, the kind of voice shaped by decades of speaking to rooms full of people who needed steadying. But underneath the composure, Celeste could hear it. The specific exhaustion of a man who had been through something humiliating and was still carrying it. She introduced herself. There was a brief pause. "I know who you are, District Attorney Madler," he said. "Everybody in this county does. Then you know why I'm calling." Another pause, shorter. "I figured someone would, eventually." She was direct with him. She explained the difference between filing a complaint with the sheriff's department, where it would be received, logged, and quietly disappeared, and filing one directly with the DA's office. A complaint filed with her office went on the official public record. It could not be suppressed by Tomlinson. It could not be lost. It would be investigated properly, or the investigation itself would become part of the record. She told him about the 11 previous complaints against Perman. She did not tell him they had all been buried. She didn't need to. The silence on his end of the line told her he already suspected it. "There's something else," she said. "I need you to understand what your complaint would mean. Not just for you. For everyone who filed before you and got nothing. You would be the first official complaint through this office. The first one that can't be touched." Wenrick was quiet for a long moment. "My mother called me this morning," he finally said, "after she saw the video." He paused. "She said she was proud of me for staying calm. But she was crying when she said it. She didn't think I heard it." His voice dropped slightly. "I heard it. I know," Celeste said. "What time do I come in?" he said. Reverend Enrique Wenrick arrived at the DA's office the following morning at 9 o'clock in his Sunday suit on a Friday, which told Celeste everything she needed to know about how seriously he was taking this. Rocco walked him through the process carefully and completely. Wenrick gave his account in full. The stop, the stated reason, the repeated checks, the 31 minutes, the deacon's video. He signed the formal complaint document in a clear, firm hand. When it was done, Rocco filed it immediately. Time-stamped, dated. On the official record of the Hargrove County District Attorney's Office. Celeste shook Wenrick's hand at the door. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now it exists," she said. "Officially, permanently, and nobody can make it disappear." She watched him walk down the corridor toward the elevator. Then she turned back to her office, where Rocco was already adding Wenrick's complaint to the growing file on the desk. She looked at the stack of documents, the photographs, the dates, the names of people who had tried to speak and been silenced. The file was getting heavier every day. Good. The filing went out on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Rocco submitted it electronically and hand-delivered a physical copy by courier to the State Law Enforcement Certification Board's regional office before noon. The document was 43 pages long. It contained Reverend Wenrick's formal complaint, 3 additional sworn statements from complainants Rocco had located and documented over the previous weeks, Celeste's own sworn account of the Route 9 stop, the video footage logged as Exhibit A, and a structured summary of Perman's 11-year misconduct history with documented evidence of suppression attached to each entry. 43 pages, every word sourced, every claim supported. Built the way Celeste had built every serious case of her career. Not to impress, but to withstand. The regional news picked it up before 2 o'clock. By 5, 3 Atlanta stations were running the story. By 7, a coalition of black pastors, Reverend Wenrick among them, had organized a prayer vigil outside the Hargrove County Courthouse. Celeste watched the footage on her office computer before she left for the evening. 30, maybe 40 people gathered on the courthouse steps in the cooling October air. Candles going, voices lifted. Some of them were older, women in church hats, men with gray at their temples. And Celeste understood without being told that for some of those people this vigil was not just about Perman. It was about every stop, every humiliation, every complaint they had filed, or almost filed, or talked themselves out of filing, because they already knew what would happen to it. She sat with that for a moment. Then she turned off her computer, gathered her things, and went home. Marlon had cooked. Not reheated, not ordered. Actually cooked. Chicken and rice, green beans from the garden they kept in the backyard, cornbread that was still warm when she walked through the door. He had set the table properly, the good placemats, the candles they usually saved for birthdays. He was standing at the stove when she came into the kitchen, and he looked at her the way he had been looking at her for 18 years, like she was something worth showing up for. "Sit down," he said. "Eat something that didn't come from a vending machine." She sat. She ate. She let herself be present for all of it. The food, the candles, the sound of Marlon's voice telling her about his day. ordinary and warm and completely untouched by depositions and misconduct files and the specific weight of institutional rot. For one full evening, she let herself believe that the hardest part was behind them. "It's almost over," Marlon said at one point. "Not asking, saying." Celeste looked at him across the table. "Almost," she said. He raised his glass. She raised hers. They clinked them together over the candlelight like people who had earned it. That night, she slept 6 hours straight, the best sleep she'd had in weeks. The call came at 8:14 the next morning. She was at her desk, first coffee going, reviewing the overnight press coverage, when her direct line rang and the voice on the other end identified itself as the office of the Georgia State Attorney General. She set down her cup. The AG's representative was professional and clipped. A formal complaint had been filed the previous evening, submitted jointly by Sheriff Ricky Tomlinson and co-signed by 3 Hargrove County commissioners. The complaint alleged that District Attorney Madler had abused the authority of her office to pursue a personal vendetta stemming from her own traffic stop. It alleged improper use of prosecutorial resources for personal purposes. It alleged that her actions had created a hostile working environment with the Sheriff's Department that posed a risk to public safety in the county. The AG's office was required to acknowledge receipt and initiate a preliminary inquiry. The representative finished, asked if she had any immediate response. "No," Celeste said. "Not at this time." She hung up the phone and sat very still. She understood immediately what this was. It didn't need to succeed. It didn't need to prove a single thing. It only needed to exist long enough to give the state certification board a reason to pause. And pause was all Tomlinson needed to let Perman walk back into his uniform and back onto Route 9. The next morning confirmed it. The certification board issued a statement announcing it was suspending its review of the Perman case pending resolution of the AG inquiry into the DA's conduct. Celeste read it on her phone at the kitchen table before Marlon came downstairs. Then she opened the Courier's website. The photograph was on the front page. Perman and Tomlinson outside the Sheriff's Department, both in uniform, both grinning, shaking hands like men who had just won something. They thought they had. Celeste set the phone face down on the table. She stared at the wall. Outside the kitchen window, the Georgia morning was gray and cold, and for the first time since Route 9, she looked like someone who might not win. 3 days after the AG complaint landed, Celeste was staring at a wall. Not literally. She was sitting at her desk, files open, pen in hand, looking like a woman who was working. But Rocco had known her long enough to recognize the difference between Celeste Madler thinking and Celeste Madler grinding. And this was grinding. This was someone running the same calculation over and over and arriving at the same insufficient answer every time. He left her alone. He had learned when to do that. At 12:17 p.m., her assistant knocked and said there was someone in the lobby asking for the DA. No appointment. Wouldn't give a reason. Would only give a name. Addison Reynolds. Celeste looked up from the wall. "Send her in," she said. Reynolds came in alone. No uniform. She was on her lunch break, civilian clothes, a gray jacket over dark jeans. She looked like someone who had made a decision that morning and was moving before she could unmake it. She closed the door behind her without being asked. She sat down in the chair across from Celeste, without waiting for an invitation. She placed a folder on the desk. It was a plain manila folder, nothing written on the outside. She kept her hand flat on top of it for just a moment, like she was giving herself one last chance to pick it back up and walk out. And then she slid it across the desk to Celeste. Celeste opened it. Inside was a printed email chain. 4 pages. The emails were dated 22 months ago, sent from an official Sheriff's Department server. The sender on the top email was Ricky Tomlinson. The recipient was Sergeant Frankie Flemmer, the department's internal records supervisor. Celeste read slowly. She did not rush. The emails documented a direct instruction from Tomlinson to Flemmer to remove a misconduct complaint from the active review queue and transfer it to an archive folder that, as Tomlinson's email put it, doesn't get looked at. The complaint in question had been filed by a black woman named Sasha Peterson, who had been pulled over, detained, and subjected to an invasive search of her vehicle without cause. The officer named in her complaint was Freddie Perman. Tomlinson's language in the email was not careful. It was not the language of a man who expected anyone outside his department to ever read it. It was contemptuous, dismissive. It referred to the complainant in terms that made Celeste's jaw tighten on the first read and tighten further on the second. The emails were real, time-stamped, originated from official department servers, sent from Tomlinson's own department account to a subordinate's department account. There was no ambiguity, no alternate interpretation, no way to walk it back. It was exactly what it looked like. Celeste set the last page down carefully. She looked up at Reynolds. Reynolds was sitting with her hands clasped in her lap, shoulders slightly forward, the posture of someone bracing for impact. There were dark circles under her eyes that suggested the decision to come here had not come with much sleep attached to it. "How did you find this?" Celeste asked. "I was archiving old department communications last week." "Standard rotation. We move files from the active server to long-term storage every 2 years." Reynolds's voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled tight. "I almost moved it without opening it. Something made me open it." She paused. "I kept thinking about that man you told Rocco about, the one who filed the complaint and ended up in jail." "Andy Gilden," Celeste said. "I kept thinking, what if the next person is someone I know? What if it's already someone I know, and I just don't know it yet?" Her jaw shifted. "I printed it, and I brought it here because I couldn't think of anything else to do with it." Celeste looked at her for a long moment. "You know what you just did," she said. Reynolds held her gaze. "I know. You understand what this means for you. Inside that department. I know what it means." She said it quietly, but there was no waver in it. "I've known what that department was for a long time. I just kept telling myself it wasn't my problem to fix." She looked down briefly. "Turns out I was wrong about that." Celeste looked at the emails one more time. 4 pages. 22 months ago. Ricky Tomlinson, in his own words, on an official server, ordering the burial of a complaint against the man who had put her husband in handcuffs on Route 9. She stood up, walked to the adjoining office door and pulled it open. "Rocco," she said. "In here. Now." He appeared in the doorway within seconds, reading her face the way he always did. "Get the state attorney general on the phone," she said, "and book us time with our contacts at the Georgia Department of Justice." She looked at her watch. "Today." Rocco looked at the folder on the desk, then at Reynolds, then back at Celeste. He nodded once and reached for his phone. Reynolds left at 12:54 p.m. Celeste walked her to the door personally, not just out of courtesy, but because she wanted Reynolds to understand, in some tangible way, that she was not alone in this building anymore. She shook her hand at the threshold and held it a moment longer than a standard handshake. "Don't talk to anyone at the department about this," Celeste said quietly. "Not yet. Not until we tell you it's time." Reynolds nodded. She looked steadier leaving than she had arriving. That was something. Celeste watched her disappear down the corridor. Then she turned back to her office, where Rocco was already moving. He had pushed the chairs back from the conference table against the far wall and spread his materials across the full length of it. Printed documents, tabbed folders, a legal pad covered in his careful handwriting, 3 separate manila envelopes, each marked with a date. He stood at the center of it, with his reading glasses on and his jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Celeste stood at the edge of the table and looked at it all. "Walk me through it," she said. He started from the left side of the table and moved right. The first section was the complaint history. All 11 of Perman's buried misconduct filings laid out in chronological order, each one accompanied by a document trail showing exactly how it had been handled inside the department. Or rather, how it had not been handled. Missing signatures on acknowledgement forms, review dates that were logged and then never followed up on, complaint files transferred to archive folders within days of being opened. The same archive folder Tomlinson had referenced in his email to Sergeant Flemmer. "It's the same mechanism every time," Rocco said, tapping the first document. "Different complaints, different years, different victims, same process. Flag it, move it, bury it. Clean enough that nobody looking from the outside would call it deliberate. Unless they looked at all 11 of them side by side. Which nobody did, Celeste said. Until now. Until now." He moved to the next section. The second section was the retaliation pattern. The 4 complainants who had faced departmental action within 90 days of filing against Perman. Rocco had tracked each case forward from the original complaint date, documenting what followed. Stops, citations. 1 arrest on charges that were later dropped without explanation. In each case, the departmental action had come from officers directly supervised by either Perman or Sergeant Flemmer, Tomlinson's records man. The line was not always straight, but it was always there. "We can't prove Tomlinson ordered each individual retaliation," Rocco said, "but we don't need to. The pattern itself is the evidence. 11 complaints, 4 retaliations, 0 investigations completed. That's not negligence. That's a policy." Celeste nodded slowly. The third section stopped her. It was 2 documents placed side by side. On the left, a printed sheet showing campaign finance filings for the 3 county commissioners who had co-signed Tomlinson's AG complaint against Celeste. On the right, a breakdown of county contracts awarded through the Sheriff's Department's operational budget over the past 4 years. Rocco let her read it before he said anything. 2 of the 3 commissioners had received significant campaign contributions from 2 contractors. Those same 2 contractors held active service contracts with the county, contracts routed through and approved by the Sheriff's Department's budget authority. The amounts were not enormous. They didn't need to be. They just needed to be consistent. And they were. Contribution cycles running on a clean 2-year rotation, each one landing neatly in the 6 months before a commission vote on departmental budget allocation. "They're not just Tomlinson's allies," Celeste said. "They're his investors," Rocco said. "And he's their return." She moved to the last document on the table. A single sheet. A sworn affidavit, signed and notarized 3 days ago, from a woman named Perry Harville, a retired Hargrove County Sheriff's Department administrator who had worked in the Records Division for 19 years, before taking early retirement in 2021. Celeste read it once, straight through. Perry Harville stated, under oath, that in the fall of 2019 she had been directly instructed by Sheriff Ricky Tomlinson to remove and physically destroy complaint documentation relating to a misconduct filing. She had complied because she was afraid of losing her job. She had regretted it since the day she did it. When Rocco had found her and told her about the case being built, she had agreed to sign the affidavit the same afternoon. Celeste set the page down. She stood at the end of the table and looked at the full picture spread before her. Weeks of work, carefully built, thoroughly sourced, airtight in the places that mattered most. Tomlinson's AG complaint had been designed to derail her. Instead, it had put everything on the state record and handed her the exact legal mechanism to counter-disclose directly to state authorities. He had given her the door. Rocco had built what was behind it. She straightened one page, aligned another, looked at Rocco across the table, File it, she said. The announcement came on a Monday morning. Celeste was in a budget meeting when Rocco knocked twice and opened the door without waiting, which he only did when something couldn't wait. He stood in the doorway and held up his phone so she could read the screen from across the room. She read it. She kept her face neutral. "Give me 10 minutes," she told the room. The Georgia Department of Justice had issued a formal statement at 9 a.m. It was 2 paragraphs, written in the flat, precise language of state institutions, and it said everything that needed to be said without a single unnecessary word. The DOJ had received a counter-disclosure from the Hargrove County District Attorney's Office containing documented evidence of systemic misconduct, complaint suppression, and potential criminal obstruction within the Hargrove County Sheriff's Department. Following review of that disclosure, the department was opening a formal investigation, effective immediately. All relevant personnel were required to cooperate fully. Obstruction of the investigation would be treated as a separate criminal matter. Rocco read it aloud to Celeste in her office with the door closed, though she had already read it twice on her phone. There was something about hearing it spoken out loud in this room. In the office she had been in for less than 2 months, in the county she had come back to fix, that made it real in a way that a screen couldn't. When he finished, neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Celeste said, "What's the department saying?" Rocco set his phone down. "Nothing publicly. But I have it from 2 sources that Tomlinson called an all-hands meeting this morning that lasted 11 minutes before people started walking out. By noon, the consequences had begun arriving in the visible, concrete way that Celeste had been building toward since the morning on Route 9. The State Certification Board, which had suspended its review of Perman at Tomlinson's urging 3 weeks earlier, reversed its suspension and announced it was resuming proceedings immediately. The AG's office, which had opened a preliminary inquiry into Celeste's conduct based on Tomlinson's complaint, issued a 1-sentence statement withdrawing that inquiry in full. No explanation offered. None was needed. And Freddie Perman, badge number 1147, 20 years on the force, the man who had put Marlon Madler in handcuffs on the side of Route 9 without a moment of doubt or hesitation, was placed on administrative leave by the end of the business day. It was the first disciplinary action of his 20-year career. Rocco brought her the memo confirming it at 4:47 p.m. She read it, placed it in the file. She did not celebrate. Not because she wasn't satisfied, she was, but because she knew that satisfaction was not the same thing as finished. There was still work ahead. There would always be more work ahead. That was the nature of the thing she had chosen to do with her life. The commissioners moved fast once the state got involved. The particular speed of men who could read a room and had just realized the room had completely changed. Commissioner Hector Beckford, who 3 weeks earlier had called Celeste directly to suggest she let things go and called her pursuit of this case a spectacle, issued a public statement by 2 o'clock that afternoon. The statement expressed his full confidence in the district attorney's office and his commitment to ensuring accountability in county law enforcement. It did not mention the phone call. It did not mention the word spectacle. The 2 other commissioners who had co-signed Tomlinson's complaint against her issued similar statements within the hour, each one carefully worded to suggest they had always been on the right side of this. Celeste read all 3 statements. She filed them away without comment. Inside the sheriff's department, the shift was immediate and atmospheric. The old guard, the sergeants and senior deputies who had built their careers inside Tomlinson's system, who had watched complaints disappear and said nothing, went quiet. Doors stayed closed. Conversations dropped to murmurs. Addison Reynolds, who had been walking into that building every day since delivering the folder to Celeste's office, with the low-grade dread of someone waiting for a consequence that never quite arrived, noticed the difference the moment she came through the door Monday morning. Nobody approached her. Nobody looked at her sideways. Nobody said a thing. The warning system had gone offline, because the people running it were now trying to save themselves. Across town, in the sheriff's department, Ricky Tomlinson sat alone in his office with the door closed. His phone had been ringing since 9 o'clock. His desk phone, his cell phone. Numbers he recognized, commissioners, attorneys, county officials who had been perfectly comfortable accepting his hospitality for 16 years and were now calculating how far they needed to stand from him before the ground gave way. He didn't answer. He sat in his chair behind his desk in the office he had occupied for 16 years, in the building he had run like it was his personal property, and he looked at the phone and let it ring. 3 weeks into the state investigation, on a Sunday afternoon, Celeste asked Marlon to drive Route 9 with her. He didn't ask why. He just got his keys. It was the kind of October afternoon that makes Georgia look like a painting. The sky was wide and pale blue, the tree line burning orange and red on both sides of the road, the light coming in low and gold through the windshield. Marlon drove easy, one hand on the wheel, the Sunday radio low. The Escalade moved smooth and quiet over the same asphalt it had traveled 8 weeks ago under entirely different circumstances. Neither of them talked much at first. They didn't need to. 18 years of marriage had given them a comfortable language of silence, the kind where nothing going unsaid means something good rather than something avoided. Celeste watched the road ahead and let the county move past her window. The fields, the churches, the hand-painted signs outside small businesses. She had grown up from this road, had ridden a school bus down a stretch of it every morning for 12 years, had left for Atlanta at 22 with a scholarship and a single suitcase, and the quiet, determined belief that she would come back someday, and it would mean something. She was back. It meant something. The spot appeared ahead on the right. A long gravel shoulder bordered by a rusted guardrail, a gap in the tree line, a stretch of road that looked like every other stretch of road on Route 9, and looked like nothing at all unless you knew what had happened there. Marlon knew. He eased off the gas without being asked. The Escalade drifted to the right and rolled to a slow stop on the same gravel where it had stopped 8 weeks ago, lights spinning behind it, a man with a badge, and a bad decision walking up from behind. He cut the engine. They sat there in the quiet. The wind moved through the tree line. Somewhere down the road a crow called twice and went silent. The guardrail was just ahead of them, a little rusty, completely ordinary, just a piece of road. Marlon looked straight ahead. "You all right?" "Yeah," she said. And then, after a moment, "I need to tell you something." He turned toward her. She told him about Dolly Wenrick. Dolly Wenrick was 79 years old. She was the mother of Reverend Enrique Wenrick, though she had not told her son why she came to the DA's office. She had seen the news coverage, the filing, the vigil outside the courthouse, Celeste's press statement, and she had put on her good coat and driven herself downtown on a Tuesday morning and asked the front desk if she could speak to District Attorney Madler directly. Celeste had come out to the lobby herself. Dolly was a small woman, neatly dressed, silver hair close-cropped, hands folded over a purse she held in her lap, like she was in church. She had the particular stillness of someone who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and had finally decided to set it down. She told Celeste that 11 years ago, Freddie Perman had pulled her over on Route 9, alone, late at night. She had been coming home from a church board meeting, the same church her son now pastored. The stop had lasted over 40 minutes. No citation was issued. No charges were filed. The stated reason for the stop changed twice during the encounter. What happened during those 40 minutes, Dolly said, had never left her. She had never told her son. She had never told her husband, who had passed 4 years ago. She had never told another living person. She had talked herself out of filing a complaint because she already knew, the way black women of her generation in counties like this one always knew, exactly what would happen to it. She came to Celeste's office because she needed someone with the power to do something to finally know. Celeste had filed Dolly's account as part of the official state record that same afternoon. Dolly Wenrick, 79 years old, was on the record now. Time-stamped, documented, permanent. Her story could not be buried. Marlon was quiet for a long time after Celeste finished. The light through the windshield had shifted while she talked, gone from gold to amber. The shadows longer now across the gravel shoulder and the rusty guardrail and the road ahead. He reached across the center console and took her hand. His grip was warm and solid, and said everything he didn't put into words. She held on. After a long moment, Marlon started the engine. He pulled back onto Route 9 and pointed them toward home, and neither of them said another word the rest of the way, because nothing else needed to be said. The consequences came in the weeks that followed, one after another, like dominoes falling in slow motion. Freddie Perman's decertification hearing before the State Law Enforcement Certification Board lasted 2 days. Celeste did not attend. She didn't need to. The 43-page filing, the video footage, the sworn statements, the email chain, Perry Harville's affidavit. It all spoke for itself, the way good evidence always does when it's been built carefully and honestly and without shortcuts. The board's decision came back unanimous. Freddie Perman was formally decertified, stripped. He could never serve as a law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia again. Not in Hargrove County. Not anywhere. 20 years of a badge and everything he thought it entitled him to. Gone. Permanent. Irreversible. The criminal charges followed within the week. 2 counts of civil rights violations under state law, filed by Celeste's office, with the full evidentiary record attached. Perman hired a lawyer who took 3 weeks to review the evidence and then apparently told his client the truth about what it meant, because the call came on a Thursday afternoon. They wanted to discuss a plea. Celeste let Rocco handle the negotiation. She trusted him completely, and she also knew that watching the man who had handcuffed her husband on the side of Route 9 bargain his way out of a trial would require a level of detachment she wasn't certain she could maintain in a room with him. The plea was entered on a Friday morning in the Hargrove County Courthouse, the same building Celeste had rushed to on that October morning 8 weeks late, with gravel dust still on her tires. 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and a formal public apology, written and signed, entered into the permanent official record of the court. Celeste read the apology in her office after it was filed. It was 2 paragraphs, legally crafted, carefully minimal. It did not say nearly enough, but it was on the record. His name beneath it, his signature. Permanent. That was something. Ricky Tomlinson's fall was louder and faster than anyone had publicly predicted, though Celeste had privately anticipated it for weeks. The DOJ investigation moved quickly once the full dossier was in state hands. The obstruction charges were not complicated. The emails were real. The affidavit was solid. And Perry Harville was a credible witness who had nothing left to be afraid of. 4 counts: obstruction of justice and official misconduct. The indictment was handed down on a Wednesday and announced publicly by the state before Tomlinson could get ahead of the story. He announced he would not seek re-election the same afternoon. His resignation from the sheriff's office came 4 days later, in a statement so short and so devoid of accountability that it read like a man who still didn't fully believe it had come to this. 16 years. Gone. Commissioner Hector Beckford, who had called Celeste directly to tell her to let it go, who had used the word spectacle like it was a warning, did not seek re-election either. He announced his retirement from public life in a brief statement that mentioned his family and his health and said nothing at all about Hargrove County. The county commission, now operating under the pressure of an active state investigation and a public that had been watching closely for months, voted unanimously to establish an independent civilian review board for the sheriff's department. It was a reform Celeste had championed in her campaign platform, back when people had told her she was being idealistic. The vote was unanimous. 3 weeks after Tomlinson's resignation, Addison Reynolds was promoted to lieutenant. She had been passed over for the position twice in 3 years. The transitional sheriff appointed in Tomlinson's place reviewed her record, reviewed the circumstances, and signed the promotion paperwork on her first week in office. Reynolds called Rocco when she found out. He told Celeste. Celeste sat with that for a moment and felt something warm and uncomplicated move through her chest. The cookout was held on a Saturday in early November, organized by the Pastors' Coalition in the yard behind Grace Tabernacle Baptist. It was not a formal event. No podium, no cameras, no speeches. Just long tables and good food and the particular ease of a community that had been holding its breath for a long time and had finally been given permission to exhale. Celeste moved through the crowd slowly, stopping often. She talked to people she had known her whole life, and people she had only just met, and people whose names she recognized from the documents in her files, names that had been attached to complaints and setbacks and quiet humiliations for years, and were now attached to people standing in afternoon sunlight, eating potato salad, and laughing at something their grandchildren had done. Near the far end of the yard, Reverend Wenrick found her. He was smiling broadly, the ease of a man unburdened. He introduced the small woman beside him simply. "My mother." Dolly Wenrick was dressed neatly in a burgundy coat, silver hair close-cropped, hands folded in front of her. She looked at Celeste for a long moment, studying her, taking her in, and then she reached out and took both of Celeste's hands in hers. Her grip was stronger than it looked. "I always knew somebody would come back," Dolly said. Celeste understood immediately. Not somebody from Atlanta. Somebody from here. Somebody who had grown up knowing exactly what this county could do to a person and had gone away and built something powerful and come back and used it. Her throat tightened. She held Dolly's hands and nodded. "I'm glad it was you," Dolly said. Later, Celeste stood at the edge of the yard where the grass met the tree line. Across the yard, Marlin was laughing at something Reverend Wenrick had said, head thrown back, completely unguarded. The late November light was gold and fading, long shadows stretching across the grass, the air carrying the smell of wood smoke and good food and the specific relief of something finally resolved. She stood there and let herself feel it. Not triumph exactly. Not relief exactly. Something quieter and more permanent than either of those things. Something bent had been made straight. Not all the way. There would be more work tomorrow, and the week after, and the year after that. She had not fixed everything. She knew better than to believe that one case, one filing, one set of consequences, however right, however earned, could undo what decades of looking the other way had built. The work did not end here, but something real had happened in Hargrove County. Something that could not be taken back. 11 complaints that had been buried were now on the permanent record. A man who had spent 20 years believing his badge made him untouchable had discovered otherwise. A woman who had driven herself to a courthouse at 79 years old because she finally needed someone with power to know. Her story existed now. Officially. Permanently. That was not nothing. That was everything. Celeste watched Marlin laugh across the yard. watched the last October light go gold across the Georgia hills, and understood, fully, finally, in her bones, not just what she had won, what she had built. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel, and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.